Yo, what's going down, man? Triple P here. Just want to let you guys know this is the whole run of Sweetie Candy Vigilante Volume 1. It's almost like a video paperback, video trade, if you want to call it. I just thought one day that I was just going to review issue number 1, and it turned out for me doing the whole series, I guess it was more of a passion project. So I really want to thank Dynamite Entertainment for publishing this book and all the real creators that made this book come alive. This was just my love letter to you. And if you guys are going to watch this for the first time, I hope you enjoy it because volume 2 should be out right now. Man, Triple B's is out, and you guys keep it hardcore. Comics. Sweetie Candy Vigilante issue number 1. She arrives home back in New York City, walking through the snow as it forms on the ground, with her boobs popping out of her shirt and a necklace that says Sweetie right above them. She makes her way to once was her home. She sees fluorescent lights in the window of a bunny, and she says, yes, the ice cream bunny is here. She walks up to the entrance, licking her lollipop. When she steps in, she is amazed. It is now a strip club. As she looks around, she sees the stripper on the stage shaking her ass. And all of a sudden, a Patreon tries to grab the money out of her thong. The bouncer steps in, and the Patreon pulls a gun. Sweetie now is watching all of this as she walks up to the man with the gun, and she asks, is he here? And they are so mesmerized by how stunning she looks as they stare down at her cleavage with a necklace that says Sweetie. They're like, damn, girl, I'm right here. You smell just like a marshmallow. Can I get you anything from the bar? Sweetie says, I know that he is not here. He would never let that poor tree look like that. And then she points at the Christmas tree. The bartender doesn't even know who she is talking about. As Sweetie asks him, is there any specials today? I would like to have one of those homemade ice creams with rainbow sparkles and a cherry on top. The bartender says, we don't have any ice cream here. You know this is a bar. Do you realize that you're in a bar on planet Earth? As a Patreon slides over a drink and says, this is peppermint schnapps. It's just like Christmas. You'll come to like it. Dolls like you drink this up during the holidays, right? Now Sweetie looks at them and says, I know what a candy cane is. Santa brings you candy canes. Points at the bartender and says, if you have been has no idea what he's talking about. We definitely have bananas here. Sweetie now pushes him away and pulls out a pack of pixie sticks, and she pours it down her throat. And the Patreon says, damn girl, what the fuck are you tripping on, bitch? And he pours the rest of the pixie sticks on the counter and snorts it. And then his face starts to burn. He is gagging, blood is pouring out of his eyes. As his head slams hard on the floor, his buddy runs over to him and says, hey man, get up. And as they grab him, his face is melting off of his head. It is totally detached from his shoulders. It falls on the ground and it splashes right in front of Pixie, the dancer. And Sweetie is standing there just smiling. As one of his friends pulls out a gun and says, what the fuck? That is some crazy shit, bitch. And as she opens up another pixie sticks, she pours half of it down her throat. And then she pulls her glasses down, and her eyes are now in a hypnotic state. She opens up her mouth, and now she has fangs. And then she blows the rest of the pixie dust on the gun, and it starts to melt. and it goes into his hand and it starts to melt his hand off. She leans over to him and says, "If you know you've been good or bad, so you better be good for goodness sake." That is right when he looks up at Sweetie and says, "You fucking crazy ass bitch. I'm gonna fucking kill you." Sweetie now pulls out a piece of bubble gum and she starts to chew it. And then she blows a big old bubble and it pops and it goes all over his face. And his face starts to melt down to the ground. And now Sweetie puts on her glasses and says, now he wasn't very nice at all. Sweetie now turns to the last two employees in the bar, Pixie, the dancer, and the bartender, and she says, "So the ice cream bunny isn't here. Well, he is a friend of mine, and when he comes back, tell him that I have been looking for him." Pixie now looks at Sweetie and says, "Yes, I will for the rest of my life." And Sweetie looks back at her and says, "I will be back. And when I come back to this place, you will make sure it is worthy for the ice cream bunny to return. Do you understand me?" And they both look at her and say, "Yes, we will be good." Now Pixie looks at Sweetie and says, I think I love you." Sweetie now walks over to Pixie and grabs her arm and she holds it out and she lifts up her hand and there's a ring that is blinging with light and she slams it down on Pixie's forearm and it brands her. And when she pulls it away, there is a heart that says "Sweetie." Now, as Sweetie is walking out of the bar, one of the Patreons is filming her with his phone. And she notices this, and she turns around and looks at him. And then she pulls out a long string of licorice, and she swings it around like a lasso over her head. And then she wraps it around his neck, and then pulls it really fast and decapitates him. And then she grabs his phone and deletes the video. And now she turns around and she goes to the Christmas tree. She says, "Oh, my little friend, I have such a sweet tooth for my little frosty pine cone. I am rolling so hard." And now she bites hard on the wire. And the Christmas lights, they turn super fluorescent and bright. The Christmas tree comes alive, and Sweetie and the tree hug each other, and she says, "You are looking like a boss." And all of a sudden, a giant gummy bear comes alive, and Sweetie says, "Don't let him scare you. He's just a big old teddy bear. But it's the gummy shark that you have to worry about." And they start laughing. Sweetie says, "There are no bad eggs in this place. It is dirty. Now clean it up. And we will be back to check on you too. Now listen to your new boss." And she points at the Christmas tree. And as they walk out of the bar, she is shaking her fine ass. Pixie and the bartender stare in wonder as the full moon shines bright in the sky with snow coming down. End of chapter 1. Sweetie Candy Vigilante, issue number 2, Run This Town. "What the hell just happened?" the bartender says to Pixie. And she says, "Doesn't that hurt? What does that mark mean?" as she grabs her wrist and looks at it, and there is a heart with Sweetie in the middle of it. But the bartender has a big old X on his. As he picks up Pixie and throws her to the ground, she says, "Dude, what does it mean? You told her that you would do whatever she said." "Yeah, that's the thing that I say when I want to avoid getting my face melted off by some lethal pixie stick powder." Pixie now says, "Well, we gotta get this place cleaned up before she comes back." And then you hear someone say, "Oh, that's a shame." And you see a man wearing a candy necklace, and he takes a shot of liquor and he walks over to Pixie. He holds out her hand, and they both have the same branded tattoo on them that says Sweetie with a heart around it. He holds up the candy necklace and says, "Take a bite." Pixie's like, "No, thank you. And who are you?" He says, "Sweetie marked you. Good news is now you're one of us." The bartender jumps in and says, "I hate to break up this tender moment between you and this sugar fairy." As the man looks at the bartender and says, "You gotta know, this isn't gonna end well for you." The bartender yells, "What the hell does this mean to us? And who the fuck are you? And how did you get in here?" He looks at the bartender and he says, "Please stop screaming. I assure you, you have just enough time to do this. And as soon as we wrap things up here," the bartender just yells at him, "Oh, really? You think I'm gonna stand here and just listen to some boy band looking hipster jacked up on Skittles? Tell me, what fucking time is it? Some killer just fucking strolls in and offs everyone because she can't get her ice cream? Then she tells me I am now working for some magical gumdrop tree and I gotta clean up the crime scene because the Easter Bunny is coming? Is that some bullshit?" He looks up and down at the Christmas tree and then looks back at the bartender and says, "Boy band? I think you meant to say ice cream bunny, sir." "Oh, fuck you, lost boy. I don't know what the hell is going on over here or who is behind this crazy shit, but I am done. You need to get back on your bicycle and ride the fuck back to Billiesburg now." Now the bartender pulls out his phone to call the owner of the bar, Scurvy. But he says, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Now Pixie and the bartender start to argue as the phone falls on the ground and it smashes. The bartender now picks up Dixie by her throat and he says, "You bitch, now you are done." And he grabs a broken bottle and he is going to stab her in her neck. And right before he does, the man grabs the bartender's hand and tosses him over the table. And as he jumps up, he is transforming into a wolf. He grabs the bartender by the neck and says, "Sweetie knows a rotten egg when she sees one. If you had any good in you, this wouldn't happen." His brand on his arm is an X, not a circle, with Sweetie in the middle of it. It knows when you've been good or bad. Remember when I said you had plenty time to scream? Well, now would be a good time as the wolf jumps at the bartender and he rips a hole right through his chest and he is holding his heart. And he looks up at Pixie and she says, "Oh my God, please, please don't eat me." As the wolf takes a bite of his candy necklace, he says, "You see, that's the problem with fairy tales. A wolf always wants to eat somebody, right? Red Riding Hood." Grandma's on the menu. Three little pigs, all that huffing and puffing, blowing houses down for what? To eat some dirty little pig that's building his house made out of mud? It always ends with the same stereotype. That's our legacy, just waiting and lurking and hiding for the right moment to pounce on some poor kid or old lady in the bathroom, right? You see, what just happened, first things out of your mouth is, don't eat me. Do I look like I want to eat you? We're having a conversation. At what point did I make any advances towards you like you were going to be on the menu or I was going to kill you? Pixie just now looks at him, says, "Oh, I'm sorry." As the wolf looks at her and says, "That guy was going to kill you." You see, as he holds up the bartender's wrist and it has an X on it. This is what happens when you are evil. Sweetie knows who's good and who's bad. Now look down at your wrist. You can see it is the same as mine. You're lucky. Sweetie marked you, and now you are one of us. She chose you. And I know you're probably thinking right now, Pixie looks up at him and says, "What? Like I fell down some rabbit hole?" That explains why I'm talking to a wolf wearing a candy necklace right now. He says to her, "I was thinking more in the line, wow, how did I get so lucky tonight? And I'm sorry, is this awkward for you? The whole candy thing?" And Pixie says, no, not like the candy thing. It's more like taking back, you know, talking to a wolf thing. I am trying to figure out how I fit into your plans." As he slowly transforms himself back into a man, he says, "Okay, I understand. Say no more. This is what I do. I work for Sweetie, and now so do you." And course Tinsel over there, and they both look at the tree. He says that I am here to take you to Sweetie. There is a lot of good work to be done in this city. Sweetie is on a mission to make this world good again. And guess what? It starts right here. We have to get going. Sweetie is waiting. He looks up at the Christmas tree and says, "We got to get going. You take care of this, Tinsel." And the tree responds back to him and says, "It's done. We're good. This place will shine like Rudolph's blinking beacon." Now, as they walk into the snowy streets, they get into his car and she says, "And the tree talks too?" "Well, that tree's name is Tinsel." "Well, what's yours?" "Well, my name is Patty Pixie Sticks. My friends call me Pixie." "Oh, I see what you did there. Well, if that isn't destiny, I don't know what is." "Okay, Miss Pixie Sticks, let's bounce." And they get into his car and they drive off. As she asks him, "What is your name?" He says, "It's John Andrews, but my friends call me Candy Wolf." "Well, of course they do. I see what you did there, Candy Wolf." She looks up and says, "This is a nice ride, and it smells really good in here, like candy. So, what are you, like a henchman or a hench wolf?" He looks at her and says, "What you just experienced was the power of goodness over evil, Pixie. Evil's number is up. I'm just someone very fortunate, just like you, by the way. Sweetie likes to keep the company vehicle seasonal, and there is Christmas cookies in there. If you like." And she says, "Wow, there is. Wow, this is pretty much the best thing that I've ever ate." "Well, of course it is," he says. "You're going to find that your life is going to be much sweeter from this day on, Pixie." And she looks at him and says, "Thanks for the jacket. I dress this way for work. This job is a way for me to earn money and, to live. And I usually dress pretty normal, but I want to save money and get back to school so I can get a better job." He says, don't apologize for the way that you dress or your formal profession. You made an honest living, and dancing is a beautiful thing. Your dancing job led you to a good job. She says, my formal profession? Do you mind if I ask where we are going? I told you I am taking you to Sweetie. She has big plans for you. Good thing, Pixie. Just say that today you got a sweet life upgrade. She says, well, I'm sorry, I have questions. Who is she? He says, well, she is Sweetie. Yeah, well, I got that. I don't understand any of this. Why does she have fangs? Is she some kind of vampire? Is she a candy vampire? He says, well, I have fangs, and she's got fangs too, and I'm not a vampire. Are you even serious? Did you not see my other form? Clearly, I'm a wolf, Pixie, and there is no such thing as vampires, Pixie. And she says, right, coming from a talking candy eating wolf, how could I ever make that mistake? Am I even having this conversation? Can you see how I might be asked this question? He says, actually, no, I can't. She tells him, I just want to know what is going on, Mr. Candy Wolf. Well, I work at that bar. What's gonna happen when Scurvy, the bar owner, finds out that she, Sweetie, killed his people and those two goons that worked for him? He's gonna come looking for me. Candy Wolf now looks at her and says, you have nothing to worry about. I am taking you to Sweetie, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done in this city. Sweetie's on a mission to make the world good again. She's like, yeah, I know, you already said that, but who is she? He says, she is the most wonderful creature in the world, and you are one lucky pixie. I am going to tell you the story of Sweetie, the Candy Vigilante. She is the daughter of the Candy Man. Yes, the actual Candy Man that makes the sun rise and sparkle. He's going to rid this world of everything bad, and you better believe she knows who's good and who is bad. She's like Santa? That's funny. Santa? No, she's not Santa. Santa actually, well, let's just say he's involved with her. She says, involved? Right. Just like the ice cream bunny seems to be involved with her. He's like, well, yes and no. As they pull up to where Sweetie is, Candy Wolf says, to live the good life, everyone needs a little sugar in their lives, Pixie. And she says, yes, they do. As Sweetie walks up to the car on the snowy New York street, Sweetie steps into the back seat of Candy Wolf's car, and he says, Sweetie is gonna run this town. She's the new candy boss. And as they drive off, end of chapter 2. Sweetie Candy Vigilante, Chapter 3, Candy Boss. As they pull into the factory of Sweetie Candy Vigilante, Sweetie jumps out of the car and says, there's my big boy, and runs over to the big gummy bear and hugs him. Meanwhile, Candy Wolf is telling Pixie that they are home, and she says, where is home? He says, it's Sweetie Candy Vigilante. As Sweetie says, why don't you give her a tour? And Pixie looks at him and asks, what is this place? Candy Wolf says, here you're free, Pixie, if you truly wish to be so. Ask her, what's it gonna be? Christmas cookies?
candy cane, eggnog, but please don't say fruitcake. You see what we do here? It is called seasonal air. Just pick one and see what happens. Okay, Christmas cookies. All right, done. And the next thing you know, the whole factory smells like Christmas cookies. 'Tis the season after all. Now, Candy Wolf says, Pixie, meet Hansel and Gretel. They're Sweetie's Candy's mix masters. Pixie is now part of the Candy Vigilante. Pixie says, so you guys are actually Hansel and Gretel? And they both say yes. Well, this factory is awesome. Am I a little surprised that this building isn't made out of gingerbread, though? Gretel says only witches do that. And yeah, the city has a strict code on building materials. Gingerbread is strictly prohibited. And then she looks at Pixie and says, we don't make jokes about gingerbread. Candy Wolf says, Pixie is just getting used to our ways. Pixie says, it's all good. I'm sorry, I will never mention ginger or bread ever again. Now Hansel and Gretel look at Pixie and say, it's our dream that one day we can break the signata of gingerbread houses and the filthy witches that exploit them for their dark magic. Pixie says, it's all good. And they look at her with excitement in their eyes. So, are you, Pixie, are you from a fairy descent? No, I don't believe so. So what? What about elves, imps, gnomes, goblins? Are you from the forests of Mordor? She says, nope, that's a negative on all of that. Hassel then asks, do you produce dust? And how and where do you conceal your wings? Candy Wolf now jumps in and says, okay, I think we're done here. We gotta let you guys get back to work. And Hansel says to Pixie, it was sweet to have met you. We look forward to one day sharing the story of our glorious victory against the evil forest witch. As Pixie and Candy Wolf walk away, she says, I hope the whole gingerbread thing wasn't too offensive to them. Candy Wolf just looks at her and says, no, it's fine. The whole gingerbread house witch thing is just them doing them. Around here, they tell their stories over and over. Every time they tell it, it gets more involved into way more action, superhero stuff. Like I was locked in a cage and I tricked the evil blind witch to thinking I was too thin by stretching a twig through the bar in the cage instead of my arm. Then I busted the cage door down and Roundhouse kicked her. Then Gretel jumped on her and put her in a headlock. She grabs the witch's brooms and pushed her in the oven. The witch now turns into a zombie, so Gretel shoves the broomstick through her brain. Yada, 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 you get it. But don't get me wrong, they're epic witch hunters and legends, but now they're just fiction writers. And now as they walk into the lounge area, he says, this is Sweetie's Lounge. Now please take a seat and have a drink. And trust me on this. And Pixie says, I do trust you, but I'm sorry. I really would like to know what is happening. I don't know what you want from me, Pixie says. And as she points at her branded tattoo, she says, what does this mean? He says, trust me, I saved your life, remember? You're one of us now, Pixie. Sweetie chose you, and this is the beginning of your new sweet life. Just take a sip, and as she puts the bottle to her mouth, she says, this tastes like everything. Now please tell me about her. Who is she? What is she? As they hold their sodas, Candy Wolf says, Sweetie is here to make the city a sweeter place, and she believes that if there is no more attention on good rather than all of the awful stuff, the world can be a better place for all of us. Pixie now says, okay, but what is she? Candy Wolf leans over and says, she is a daughter of a very special man. Have you ever heard of the Candy Man? The who? the Candy Man? And he looks at her with her fangs and says, you are chosen and you will listen or you will leave now. And she takes a breath and says, I am listening. I am not going anywhere. Sweetie is the Candyman's daughter. Her name is Sweetie Cane. Her parents are Zucker and Coco Cane, and they have an older son named Adam Bomb Cane, who is Sweetie's brother. The Canes own and operate the famous candy factory and the controversial stone shop called Sweet Shop, and that is on the Lower East Side. The Sweet Shop was a New York City landmark, specialized in making the holiday treats and Halloween, Christmas, Valentine's Day, Easter candy for the holidays. The New Yorkers develop a fascination with the store and all of its goodness that they sold: the homemade candy, the ice cream, the baked goods. Sweetie grew up living and working in the shop alongside her parents and her brother. The Sweetie's father, Zucker Kane, was known in the neighborhood as the Candy Man. Little did the patrons of the store know that Zucker was actually the real Candy Man. He was gifted with the power of bringing joy to his community simply by creating and selling his candy creations in the cane shop. Zucker had magic ingredients that filled the heart and the minds with delight. Their ingredients were not harmful and they were promoted in the shop as being good for your heart and soul. Zucker believed that there was some addictives that are good for you, and his sweets promised to bring you joy and happiness for life. Zucker's wife Coco faithfully worked by her husband's side, keeping his secrets and raising their two children, both Sweetie and Adam, and they were trained by their parents to become master candy makers. The family was a beloved fixture in the community. The factory workers and the shop employees were considered family. Now Pixie looks at him and says, so whatever happened to the shop and the factory? Zucker and Coco were the sole owners of the sweet candy shop, but they had an investor named Max Folger who received a percentage of the profits. Max was a businessman and not a candy maker. He and the Zuckers trusted one another, and Max made a good living off of his share of the proceeds. Max was a trusted confidant in Zucker and Coco, and he was proud of their achievements. Max had no interest in the ownership of the shop because he was content with the profit he was awarded by the Cane's hard work. Max had a son named Bart. He was an evil dude who doesn't like candy, and his only concern in the Cane's business is his father's share in the earnings. He is a greedy creep who grew up jealous of the Cane's children. Max was embarrassed and disappointed by his vile son. He realized that in Bart, he was serving under, and decided to leave his portions of the profits to Sweetie and Adam, who he loved as his own. 2 days before Christmas Eve, Max Folger decides to draft his will, leaving the Cane's children his financial interest in the sweet shop. Max informs Zucker, Coco, Sweetie, and Adam and his son of his decision, which was of course met by fury and hate by Bart. Before he can legally bind his will on Christmas Eve, Max, Zucker, and Coco mysteriously disappears. Although an extensive police investigation was done, they were never seen again. Heartbroken by the disappearance of their parents, Sweetie and Adam launched their own search, which would end up turning up nothing. They, of course, suspected Bart Volgar, but there is no evidence connecting him. After 4 years of searching for their parents, Adam Bomb came informed Sweetie that he doesn't want to work in the store and he can't bear the thought of consulting on not knowing what happened to their parents. And Max, he believes that Bart is behind their disappearance, even though he can't prove it. His deep rooted hatred for Bart is controlling his life. Adam tells Sweetie now it is up to her to continue their parents' work, and he signs over his share of the factory and shop to her. Sweetie is heartbroken and disappointed by her brother's decision to quit and leave her to deal with the evil Bart Bulgar. Adam tells Sweetie that he trusts her and she is stronger than she knows, and she has been blessed with their father's secret. It's in her blood, stronger than it ever was in Adam. Adam leaves Sweetie to run the shop and factory and sets out into the world seeking the answers to the disappearance of their parents and Max. Sweetie becomes the sole owner of King's Sweet Shop and the factory and paid Max portions of their profits to that horrible Bart Volgaire. Although a master candy maker and devoted to the crafts, would become increasingly distraught by the loss of her family and the progressive gentrification of New York City, which was destroying the mom and pop shops and the pawn shops in favor for high rise buildings and commercial enterprises. Meanwhile, New York's finest obsessed narcissistic mayor declares war on sugar, desperately trying to enact legislation to outlaw sweets. The arrogant mayor believes that he knows what's best for the citizens of New York City as he launches an aggressive campaign to eradicate what he deems hazardous to the public, completely oblivious and uncaring to small business owners of the ice cream shops, the bakeries, the restaurants, the candy stores, etc. He forces his personal beliefs on the city rather than letting citizens make their own decision about what they choose to eat and enjoy. Furious by the mayor's attempts to outlaw candy, ice cream, cake, etc., Sweetie closes down the family company and the sweet shop, freeing herself from Bart Bulger as he is her sworn enemy. She knows he is responsible for her parents and Max's disappearance. Sweetie created her new brand, Sweetie Candy Vigilante. Bart Bulgar is now involved in organized crime and regards Sweetie Candy's brand as something he was cheated out of. He conspires with the mayor that her brand of sweetness is bad for the citizens of the city and vows to destroy her. Sweetie now opens up this factory. She declares her own war on anyone who tries to tread down her brightness. She lives to campaign for the cause of those who enjoy a little sugar in their lives. But what he doesn't realize is that Sweetie has become a master candy maker and a chemist, and she possesses the skills far beyond her father. She has developed creations that are detectable and powerful addictives. We work in this factory, and Sweetie spends her days and nights crafting new candy formulas that have special, powerful, delicious, and addictive confrontations. Searching through her father's library, she learns that he is a master candy wizard. She discovers her father's journals and recipes for making candy that has special powers that only feel their magic on good of the heart. The formulas warn that if a bad person consumes or comes in contact with the magical recipe, it will end badly. Sweetie decides to experiment on the variation secret formulas on herself, feeling her powers grow stronger every day. She has evolved into this being, and now she is Sweetie Candy Vigilante. Now Pixie says, so why doesn't she just take care of this Bart dude? She got lit and took the entire bar out. Why doesn't she just off him off now? Candy Wolf says because he's the only link to find out what happened to her parents and Max. He is living on borrowed time, Pixie. And she says, well, how do I fit into this story? Well, Sweetie chose you and the site that the bar that you worked in is going to be the new Sweetie Candy Vigilante shop. The bar was designed to be the new shop as foretold to Sweetie by the ice cream bunny. Pixie looks up at him with confusion in her face and she says, you said being. Is she right now? Right then and there, Sweetie walks up and says, Pixie Stick, are you a good egg or a bad egg? Candy Wolf says, you need to be the being that you really are before all the bad stuff happens and dims your shine. Pixie smiles and says, ever since I could remember, every thought begins, well, does it come in black? And now all I see is light. I am with you both now and forever. I have a couple requests. Oh, yeah? What is that? Well, can you change the air to make it smell like Play Doh? Candy Wolf and Sweetie both look at Pixie and say, yeah, of course, we can totally do that. And she says, at some point, I would like to hear the story of Candy Wolf. And as he bites a piece of his candy from his necklace, he says, well, that's a whole nother can of gummy worms. All in good time, Pixie. And now Sweetie yells, well, goody gumdrop, grab those drinks, CW. We got some sweet new stuff to show you guys. Now let's hit the weapons room. Weapons! End of chapter 3. Sweetie Candy Vigilante chapter 4, Lost Cherries. As they make their way into the weapons room, Pixie is holding up a gun with jawbreakers in it, and she says, wow, what do these do? Sweetie says, all my new little sweet friend, would you like a jawbreaker? She says, well, who doesn't? Here, try one. Put this one in your mouth. You see, it knows that you are good. And they have up dolls for shooting practice. And as they fire the gumballs at the dummies, it blows up. Candy Wolf now says, whoa, boss, now that was a sugar rush. Sweetie, just shut the conversation down. Now, Pixie says, so it's literally a jawbreaker? Sweetie looks at her and says, it's developed for overly chatty bad eggs. Pixie looks up and says, I just had that in my mouth. It can't hurt you, Pixie. You're one of us. Do you trust me? Well, of course. As they hand over a shot of lost cherries to her, she says, I call it lost cherries. Down it goes, and they all take the shot of lost cherries. Now, Sweetie hands the jawbreaker gun over to Pixie and says, here, take it for a spin. As they finish up in the shooting room, Sweetie says we need to get Pixie into some new tactical gear and get to work. We'll head over to see the process Tinsel made on the new store. Pixie says, how are we going to claim the store from Scurvy? That scum has been using the bar as a drug front for the whole neighborhood, and they know it. Sweetie says, oh, that? Hansel and Gretel had a very productive meeting with the former proprietor, and everything worked out very nicely. And Candy Wolf says, he was slightly uncooperative at first, a bit of a conversational problem, and everything worked out just fine. I'm sure the neighborhood will be delighted. And now we see Hansel and Gretel on bullet bikes riding through the city. Hansel and Gretel make their way to Scurvy, the bar owner. Hansel holds out a piece of paper and says, "You will sign now." Garvey now says, "What the fuck are you supposed to be?" As the girl with him says, "Yeah, he looks like the Terminator, dude. Maybe from the future." "Yeah, I'm sure. Shut up, skank." And now Hansel points at her and says, "Silence, witch." She says, "Bitch, who are you calling witch? I'll knock you the fuck out." Now, as Gretel walks up and says, "I am Hansel, and this is Gretel, and you will sign now." Scurvy says, "What? Who the fuck are you working for, dude? The Brothers Grimm? Wow, how the fuck do you do? I'm Scurvy, and this is Scumbelina, the mini crack imp. Fuck you, Scurvy." Hansel says, "We have no business with you, imp." Now Scurvy reaches into his jacket and pulls out a gun. Gretel sees that, and at the same time, she throws an axe and it cuts his arm off and it falls to the ground. And now he's on his back. Hansel walks over to him and says, "Sign while you have your other hand." All right, I'll fucking sign." He signs the paper, and Hansel pulls the axe out of his shoulder. And they jump back on their bullet bikes. But Scurvy pulls out a gun and he's gonna fire. But before he can, Gretel throws the axe and it cuts him in his neck. And she says, "Go back to hell, goblin," as they drive off, leaving the imp there. But she's just a normal girl. And now we're back at the store where Candy Wolf is talking to Sweetie and Pixie, and he says, "And that's how we got the whole business sorted out. Sweetie is now the new owner and the sole proprietor of the ice cream bunny, soon to be the new Sweetie Candy Vigilante store." And now Pixie says, "Okay, I got it, but you don't realize that even though Scurvy owned the store, he signed it over to Sweetie. He works for the crime syndicate." Candy Wolf now says, "Let them come ask their questions and we will provide the appropriate response." Sweetie now asks Pixie, "Do you have any fear?" And she says, "No, I don't. I have no doubts about fear or anything anymore. But I like a weapon. Can I choose a weapon?" And now Candy says, "The weapon chooses you in time. Find the right one. You'll familiarize yourself with this room and all of the magic that happens here. Learn the power, how it functions, and how we can use these tools for good." Candy Wolf now says, "We have to load up the truck and head over to the new store. Tinsel has been one busy little tree. We just need to deliver the stock, and you're gonna run the store, Pixie." "I'm what?" Now Sweetie says, "I choose you to run my first store. Who better than you? This is to start your new sweet life, Pixie. Both of you now meet me downstairs by the truck." As Candy Wolf and Pixie talk as they go downstairs. And now Pixie starts off and says, "So I have to ask, are there any more fairy tale people who work here?" "We don't like to use the term fairy tale." "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm new to this." And now Candy Wolf says, "Understood. We prefer the term supernaturals. And yes, there are more of them working here. So now that you'll be living here, you'll be living amongst the immortals." "Immortals? So I am living here now?" "Yes, of course, unless there's a problem." "No, of course not. I want to learn everything. So it's all true? All those stories?" And Candy Wolf now says, "Yes, they're all real. The Brothers Grimm, Hans Christensen Andersen. There's nothing more but then hack biographers. All those stories you read as a kid are true." And then she says, "Little Mermaid?" Red Riding Hood? He says, yeah, me and Red have some issues. Not gonna talk about it. She says, all the Disney movies? He's like, yeah, bad documentaries. I say they're more like mockumentaries. She's like, oh my God, my head is going to explode. And Candy Wolf says, yeah, we'll just wait until you meet them all. Then you can tell me about it then. And she says, the Easter Bunny, the Great Pumpkin, Santa. And he says, whoa, whoa, some things that I cannot get into right now. Don't mention Santa in front of Sweetie. There's kind of a thing going on with the two of them. And I've already said too much, so let's drop it. And now Pixie says, okay, I got it. And you said I'm one of you now? Uh huh. Well, this is awkward, but I have to ask, does that mean that I'm supernatural? Am I immortal? And Candy Wolf says, all I can say is that you'll know the answer to that when you don't have to ask. Now, as Sweetie walks up to their car, shaking her fine ass, she jumps in and says, let's bounce. And as they leave the factory, they make it to the once ice cream bunny store. Now, has a sign in front of it that says Sweetie Candy Vigilante. As they walk into the store, there is a bunch of Ana workers stocking the shelves, and Tinsel is ordering them all. Sweetie now is looking at the store, and she walks up to the window and she pulls up the glass and she sees a nice emblem of Sweetie Candy Vigilante in the window, and she says, sweet. As she walks up to Tinsel and hugs him and says, you did a magnificent job here. He says, boss, I hope that you are happy with it. She says, yes, this is home, Tinsel. And now just think, a few hours ago, what a naughty mess. And now she pulls out her phone and she texts Gummy and says that he is on his way and she can't wait for him to see this place. Candy Wolf now says, all right, let's get to work. And now we make it back to the streets where Scurvy is lying there dead and the imp normal woman. One of the crime bosses pulls up and he says, you text me from this phone. You want to tell me what happened here? She says, he's dead. They killed him. They killed him. He says, yeah, I can see that he's dead. Who killed them? She says, the two of them on the motorcycle. They chopped his head off with an axe and they came from the future. You got about 1 minute to start making sense. And he throws her on the ground. I told you, she did it. She did it. The chick on the motorcycle. She's from the future. Yes, and the German dude on the motorcycle too. He was with her, and he called me a witch. So I am clear, there was a German dude on the motorcycle from the future too? I thought he was the Terminator. I said, who are you calling witch, bitch? And as he holds up the gun to her head, he says, I see a totally different scenario. I see a murder self-deletion of two punks. Please, please, I'm telling you the truth. There were two of them on motorcycles. She took something from Scurvy and they cut his head off and made him sign something. He yells, what did he sign? And what did they take? I don't know, some kind of paper. They made him sign it and they killed him. Two German people on motorcycles. That's all I know. That's why I called you. Well, did you get their names? Yes, I got their names. It was Hansel and Gretel. And he points the gun at her head and says, yep, definitely murder self-deletion, as he pulls the trigger and kills her. And now he picks up his cell phone and he calls Mr. Vulgaire and he says, it's me and we got a code red situation. Bart now says, well, I guess you better get over here and enlighten me, as he pours a drink of Black Label Scotch. The end of chapter 4, Sweetie Candy Vigilante. Sweetie Candy Vigilante, Chapter 5, Just Desserts. The detectives look down on a wet, cold street where there is two bodies, victims laying there dead. One of them says it appears that the victim has lost his head, an arm, but wait for it, also a tooth, which is MIA. They left the head but took one of the tooths. Maybe it's some weirdo collecting teeth. Or maybe the tooth fairy just got tired of looking under pillows and is now jacking random citizens for their feelings. Well, whoever did this, at least they didn't take any of their bones. Right, so we can rule out the bone fairy then? And now the CSI determines that they did not kill each other. The headless guy didn't kill the female victim because, based on the fact that she weighs about 12 ounces soaking wet, chances are very good that the deep lacerations that caused our male victim's body to become separated from his was done by a very strong individual. Well, could a machete or another sharp weapon been used? Whatever was used was a real instant problem solver. I've never seen a wound this clean. Stealth slice, no tearing of the arteries, vessels, muscles, or bone. Only traces, amounts of this gooey, dark, pinkish red stuff on the body. All of my years, I've never seen anything like this. The female victim is a textbook gunshot, but this one here is it's something totally different, and it's definitely not a shark attack. It wasn't a boating accident, and I'm guessing the line of work that these two were in was not at all credible. It could be a gang hit. It could be it might be a serial killer. Whoever did this took trophies, or they left us a calling card. We might have a trophy killer of bad guys hunting other bad guys. Or maybe we have ourselves a vigilante. Sweetie, Pixie, and CW are now in the store and they're looking at their cell phones. Sweetie says, Gummy just texted me and said that our social media accounts are live. CW now looks down at his phone and says, oh my god, we got over 500,000 followers already. How do you do that, boss? Well, that's Gummy's hard work for you. He is fire. Pixie now says, we're everywhere and we're trending. Sweetie now says we message all of our followers and tell them to stop by the shop tomorrow and everyone will get some sweet love. Free sweets. I just want to say how proud I am of all of what we have accomplished together. We're home. We took back our house and we defeated evil. This place is pure and good. We're going to make the city sweet again. As Candy Wolf takes a bite of his candy necklace, Sweetie and Pixie's eyes lock and meet. Sweetie now says, are you ready to live the sweet life? Are you ready to become one of us? Are you ready to pledge yourself to making this city and this world right and good? Pixie, with her hands up in the air, she says, I am ready. I'll do whatever it takes by any good means. Now Sweetie says, I have a sweet tooth, Pixie. Who am I? And Pixie's eyes light up and she says, Sweetie. Sweetie now asks Pixie to hold out her arm. Pixie does and closes her eyes. As Sweetie bites down on the branded tattoo that says Sweetie with a heart around it, the blood sinks into her skin. And Sweetie says, another good egg, as Pixie now is transforming into an immortal. Candy Wolf now says, welcome to the immortals, Pixie, and I cannot wait to see what your gift is.
Now, Sweetie holds out some nunchucks and she says, "This is your gift, Pixie." And she grabs the nunchucks and she opens up one of the ends and pours some candy in her mouth. Sweetie says, "This weapon chose you." Now, Pixie demonstrates the nunchucks moves as she's able to swing them all around with light coming out of them. And she flies around the store and then she comes to a stop. Candy Wolf says, "Everything that Sweetie creates is for the greater good. The weapon is part of you, Pixie. When you use your gift for good, it will never hurt you, but don't ever betray it because it will always know your true self." Pixie says, "I honor and commit my life to you forever. Thank you, boss." Sweetie now says, "This is the new Sweetie Candy Vigilante shop. This sanctuary has been part of my family's bedrock for years until it was stolen from us and the ice cream bunny. My father and mother were gatekeepers for the immortals." Pixie now leans in over to Candy Wolf and says, "That's what you meant when you said, as foretold by the ice cream bunny. So the ice cream bunny is real?" Candy Wolf now looks down at her and says, "Zucker and Coco love Peter, and they named this place after him. Oh, Peter is his real name. He just went into hiding after everything went bad, but he's coming back, and he's got his whole hippie hoppy squad on the way." And then she says, "Peter, as in Peter Cottontail?" And he says he goes by a couple of different names. He's most famously known as, and she yells, "The Easter Bunny." And now Candy Wolf tells her the story, and he says, yeah, he can be a little bit full of himself, making the whole chocolate bunnies and his own image thing. And a lot of we call him the ice cream bunny because he had a sweet whip that used to deliver the basket, eggs, and candy. The truck was filled by ice cream. And she says, "Any particular flavor?" He said no, whichever he was in the mood for. It was funny to watch him pitching eggs out of the window, landing perfectly buried in the kids' backyard. The kids that believed in him saw him. He loved that truck. He even helped Santa out on a few runs when the weather wasn't good. It's too bad he probably's not using it now. His partner ran it off the road one day because he filled the tank up with rocky road, and the truck doesn't run on nuts. He's kind of a jackass, all hopped up on jelly beans. But he's a distracted driver, but Peter likes him, so there you go. Lucky that there was no chicks on the truck. And she says, "Is his sidekick a bunny too?" "Nah, his name is Jackrabbit. I'm sure you heard of him. He is a hare, with the super long ears like the jackass he is." Now, Sweetie says, "He's a family friend, Candy Wolf, and a member of the council." "Oh, of course, boss. I'm just putting it out there so that Pixie gets a jump on it. When Peter does show up, if he hasn't fixed his ice cream truck, maybe he'll be driving a broke down hoopty running on rainbow sprinkles. The two of them might be hopping their way here for all that we know. I'm sure the boss will hook Peter up with a sweet new ride again. Just saying." And now Sweetie tells him, "I created the new jelly beans for Jack. So that's the ice cream bunny story. And I haven't heard from Peter in a while. So the last text I got from him said that he was on his way back home." And now Sweetie says, "This is my family's second shop, and there is a hidden floor upstairs. Everybody follow me." As Sweetie finds a secret entrance, she says, "This is a speakeasy, Pixie. It's where all the immortals in the city would meet. This is a safe place where they hid and had their secret meetings to make the world a sweeter place."
They all pledge and dedicate their lives and peace and goodness on this particular planet. Pixie now looks at Sweetie and says, "On this particular planet? Well, yes, you have a lot of history to learn, sweet pea." And then Pixie says, "Well, it's so beautiful. I want to know everything about my world and apparently other worlds too." Sweetie says, "Not only is it our mission to make this world sweet, we also need to find other immortals who are hiding so they can't help us." Candy Wolf says, "Yes, smash all the bad eggs." Sweetie says, "That is right answer." And Candy Wolf says, "Those goons that were running this place as a bar didn't even know this floor existed." And Pixie says, "I worked for Scurvy because he threatened me. He was going to kill my mother if I didn't." And Sweetie now jumps in and says, "There are no bad in you anymore. The man that you were working for stole the ice cream bunny from my family. He murdered immortals. He is responsible for the bleak and decay in this neighborhood. He destroyed all the sweetness here. He threatened to kill your family, and he would have. He was a murderer and was part of the crime syndicate called KYE." And now Candy Wolf says, "Know your enemies. They'll succeed in corrupting every sleazy politician and rotten eggs in the city. They're on the KYE payroll." Pixie asks, "Does everyone who live here know about them?" And Sweetie says, "A very bad problem has corrected, and it's all good now. We're going to make sure all of them get there. Just desserts." And Candy Wolf says, "KYE is evil and ran by the man we know is behind the disappearance of Sweetie's parents and Max Volgaire." Meanwhile, the goon is making it back to Bart Volgaire's house as he points the finger at him. Bart says, "Come here, what took you long enough?" And now, as he tells Bart what happened to the goons on the street, he doesn't even care about it. He says somebody else will sell my drugs out of that bar until he informs him what happened. He says they rolled up on Scurvy and cut his off because he wouldn't cooperate with them. She rambled on about crazy shit. Bart says, "Like what?" "Like the Germans, the male and the female forced him to sign over the bar. To tell you, I gave our asset every opportunity to come correct with me. She refused and made up her own story. Of course, I had to neutralize the situation so that there was no tale to tell the 5-0. Now Bart says, "What exactly did she say about the Easter Bunny?" "Just like I said, Mr. Volgaire, the two individuals rolled up on them, and the man had Scurvy sign over papers, which apparently he did. Things went south, and he ended up without his life. Then the male and female German from the future rode off with whatever they had him sign." Bart says, "German people from the future? Did you get any names?" He says, "Yeah, the crazy bitch called them Hansel and Gretel. What's even crazier is I drove past the bar and it's some sort of sweet shop now called Sweetie Candy Vigilante." As Bart's eyes turns white as he goes, he breaks his glass and yells, "Sweetie!" End of chapter 5.
Sweetie Candy Vigilante, issue number 6, Gumballer. as the new Sweetie Candy Vigilante shop is getting ready to open up for their first day. They are getting ready and they notice that their social media has exploded with over 500,000 subs and they are verified. Sweetie now opens the door and says, "Good morning, gumdrops. I am so happy you are here. I have been waiting so long to finally meet you. And it's just so nice." And as the crowd says, "We love you, sweetie." And she says, "I love you too." And on behalf of myself and my sweet family, I just want to say, life's sweet, New York. Don't be salty. Now, as the shop builds up with Patreons, their social media hits 1.5 million subscribers and everyone is buying candy necklaces, pixie sticks, and they're getting them signed by Candy Wolf and Pixie. Meanwhile, the detectives are talking with the lab to see what that mystery substance was on Scurvy, the guy without his head. They come to a conclusion that it's sugar and cherry juice. Now they think it's time to go over to the ice cream bunny bar to see what's going on over there. Not knowing to them that Sweetie has turned it into Sweetie Candy Vigilante. And as the cops walk up to the shop, Candy Wolf says, "Looks like we got some more customers, boss." By customers, I mean cops. Candy Wolf says, "I'm sorry, we're closed. We open up tomorrow at 10 a.m. Tomorrow. Now, thank you." And as the detective says, "Good evening, sir. I am Detective Kyle Jacks. I am with the NYPD. I would like to have a word." Candy Wolf now looks up and says, "Boss?" And then Sweetie puts her hand on his shoulder and says, "I'll handle this. It's just fine and dandy as candy." She says, "Welcome to Sweetie Candy Vigilante." And the detective says, "I'm sorry, miss." And she says, "Sweetie." He says, "Sweetie." She says, "Yes, I am not miss. I am Sweetie." And then the detective says, "Oh, okay, Sweetie. I'm Detective Kyle Jacks of the NYPD Homicide Division, and this is Detective Ivory Reyes and Officer Brady. We're looking for the owner of this." And Sweetie cuts in and cuts him off and says, "Sweetie Candy Vigilante, there is no bar." She says, "There is no bar here, detective." He says, "I see that, miss. Sweetie, is the owner here?" She says, "Yes." Well, can I speak to the owner?" She says, "Yes. What is it you want to talk to me about?" And now Candy Wolf says, "Yeah, dude, you are talking to the actual boss." The detective looks at her and says, "So you are the owner of—" And then Pixie yells, "Sweetie Candy Vigilante!" And Pixie looks at the detective and says, "Detective Jax, I am Sweetie. I am the owner of this sweet shop." Now the detectives are confused, wondering if they're in the wrong address. But the deputy reassures them that they are in the right address. This is the bar called Ice Cream Bunny. They are confused. This is a candy store. And Sweetie winks her eye and says, "Sweet shop, detective. It was the ice cream bunny. But now—" And the deputy looks at her and says, "Let me guess. Sweetie Candy Vigilante?" And Sweetie yells, "Yes, it's our new shop." And the detective cuts in and says, "Miss." And Sweetie leans over to him and says, "Sweetie, Detective Jax." He looks down on her and says, "Sweetie, we're investigating a double homicide." And she responds back to him, "Homicide times two? Oh my, that's not nice at all. And now the detective says, no, it is not. We're conducting an investigation of a homicide that involves a victim who listed this address as his prior place of employment. We're in possession of evidence that confirms the victim was last recently the owner of this bar. And now Sweetie looks at him and says, it's not a bar, it's a sweet shop, detective. And the detective is like, well, I can see that. Sweetie now holds the candy in her hand and she says, would you like a fizzy bang? That's a berry blast off. They explode with flavor made from 5 different sweet, fresh berries. They have a fun burst coating made with all natural secret ingredients. And as the deputy puts it in his mouth, secret ingredients, wow, he says, taste soft and hard all at the same time. It's the most awesome thing that I've ever had. So, what is the secret ingredient? And now Sweetie says, I can't tell you. It wouldn't be a secret. As Sweetie now offers a fizzy bang to the female detective, she responds back to her, no, I'm good. I'm more of a savory type of gal, and I don't have that much of a sweet tooth. And now Pixie says, how unfortunate. The female detective says, yeah, just not a big fan of berry flavored rocket ships blowing up in my mouth. The main detective now says, thank you. We're good with all the sampling. I appreciate your time, Miss Sweetie. I have a few questions. The victim's name was John Scurvy, known around this neighborhood as Scurvy. And now Sweetie looks at him and says, I don't know who this is, and I do not know the name of the prior owner of this property. The sale and the transfer of the deed was handled by my attorney, Mr. Shark. And the detective says, Mr. Shark? Yes, my attorney, Mr. G Shark, ESQ. He handles all my administration affairs. He's got the sweetest tooth in the business. And now Pixie says, and the sharpest. And Candy Wolf looks at her and says, well, that's up for debate. And Pixie says, so bear versus wolf versus shark now? Sweetie now says, it sounds like some naughty business, Detective Jax. If you check out the county clerk, that I am the owner of this shop. Mr. Shark filed the paperwork and obtained the proper permits before we did any major restoration. It's no longer a bar. Now it is Sweetie Candy Vigilante. And we're here to do good work. I am dedicating to make this neighborhood sweet again. And now the detective says, yes, of course, I did that with the county. The owner's last name is Kane. Are you Miss Kane? And she says, yes, but please call me Sweetie. Oh, I really do appreciate you taking the time to answer a few questions. The victim appears to have no family or next of kin, and we're at a full stop on what happened to him. And the detective says, uh huh, it sure is. Again, thank you for your time. If you think of anything, contact me. I will. And I really must be closing now, detective. And now, as the detectives drive off, she says, so they're new to the neighborhood. Did everyone in this store just arrive from Planet Birthday? Or was I getting a cavity just listening to her? I hope that she has a good dental plan for all of her employees. And is it just me? Or is it always snowing around this part of town lately? And is that tree alive? Did it have eyes or was it just ornaments? I felt like it was just staring at me. And now, as our main detective pulls out the candy from his bag that he got from Sweetie, they ask him, "What did you get?" And he holds up a cherry bomb. He says, "It's a red chocolate covered cherry." And he looks at it closer and he says, "It's a cherry." Now, Sweetie walks back into her shop and holds up the card to the Christmas tree tinsel and says, "File this card." And Tinsel burns it down with his light bulb. Now, Sweetie gets a phone call and she stops and yells at everybody, "Gummy, Tinsel, close up. Honey, just text me. And Gummy, make sure everything is locked. We have to get to the factory. CW, get the card." And he looks at her and says, "Is everything okay, boss?" And she yells, "Get the car!" And as they leave on the snowy New York streets, they arrive at the factory. Sweetie steps out of the car as Bart Bulgare walks up to her and she yells, "Bart Bulgare!" End of Sweetie Candy Vigilante, Volume 1. All right, man. I hope you guys really did enjoy that. I had to jump right back in here and tell you all, man, that took a long time to do. That wasn't just done overnight, man. I had a whole week vacation and I worked 6 hours a day for 5 days in a row on those. And it took another 6 hours to finish number six. And that thing was so much fun to do. But you know what? I want to get back and doing my unboxing videos because I absolutely love to open up packs and see what I got. And so I'm going to definitely be focusing on that. But this was definitely a love letter to Sweetie Candy Vigilante, Volume 1. Volume 2 is probably out right now with issue number 1. So go check out Sweetie Candy Vigilante Volume 2, issue number 1 is what it's going to be called. Even though that they should just run it with issue number 7 and just keep on with it, but we'll see what they do with it, man. But hell yeah, yeah, I'm just wanted to say that that was like the biggest and longest video that I've freaking ever done on probably any of my channels. Because if you don't know, I am BBB Haunted Basement and BBB Hardcore Comics. So I wanted to keep those, passions separate from each other. But if you do like horror movies, go ahead and check out the Haunted Basement channel. It is so much fun what I do over there. But the comic book channel community here, I love you guys. You guys are beautiful and you look absolutely sweet. So, without further ado, check out one of my unboxing videos right there. And thank you so much for watching this till the end. Triple B's is out, and you guys, you keep it hardcore comics.